You're live.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Free Assange Vigil. This is our special Saturday show here for the 64th week. Currently, I am joined by my co-host, Steve Poikinen. We have Tariq Haddad with us, and we should be joined by Kathy Vogan and Mohammed Almazi later, potentially, just depending on how their schedules work out. But before we get started, today is day 3,582 of the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. It is day 536 since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion international monetary loan fund to the nation of Ecuador. Julian was held without arrest from a period of June 24th, 2020, until he was rearrested September 7th, 2020, under the new superseding indictment by Bill Barr's Justice Department. It is currently 1,212 days of federal incarceration for whistleblower Reality Winner, and it is 193 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning. So she has a Twitch stream, which I know we pimp out a whole bunch, but I'm going to put it in chat just in case anyone isn't following her yet. She streams Thursdays through Sundays from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you could, if you don't have a Twitch account, make one and follow her. If you do, go over there and hang out with her while she's streaming. But we have officially had Mo hop in with us as well. But this is the wrap up here of the third week of Julian's trial. We did find out yesterday that there will officially be a fourth week, and then delays on the ruling by the judge after final statements are made a few weeks after that. But I did want to pass the mic over here to Tariq and just see kind of what his thoughts are so far with the trial and everything that's proceeded over these last 3 weeks.
Yeah, hi. Good to be with you guys again. Yeah, as I'm sure everyone's aware, it's kind of been kind of a roller coaster few weeks. Personally and for Julian and his defense team, but yeah, lots going on and lots I'm sure that we'll get into. But yeah, I guess my general feeling is that it's not like a foregone conclusion as much as people say, and I think there's a lot of promising and interesting developments happening in the case. So it'd be good to talk about them and let people know what's going on.
So the reason we were trying to get you two gentlemen as well as potentially Kathy Vogan or a couple other folks is because you've had access to the Cloud video feed the entire time, and you're basically like the closest to this trial without actually being inside to observe. Which is something that is both unique and horrifying about this. The way that the biggest press freedom trial in certainly my lifetime has been operating under a near media blackout. What is the sense on the ground in front of the Old Bailey and to an extent inside the Old Bailey about the way that this show trial has proceeded up to this point? And this is like both of you can answer. I don't, it's again, man, this is done campfire style today. We can just hang out and bullshit.
Mo, do you want to go ahead?
You're muted, Mo. There you go.
Hello. Thank you for having me over. It's great to see Tariq in video. Normally I see him in the flesh.
You're lucky because he's a beautiful man.
Tell me every time.
I mean, he's not wrong, so
I'm jealous.
So the extradition hearings. Oh, did someone just say Mo's not so bad?
No.
You're beautiful. All
right. You both are very handsome individuals.
Now that we've established our hotness, let's get back
now that people's egos have been sufficiently stroked on live video broadcast.
My bad.
Is this live?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It is okay.
We do it live.
Of course it is. All right. So the extradition hearing outside, you have a presence of people who have been there when it's sunny, who've been there when it's windy, who've been there when it's cold, and you know, a collection of different types of people. And there's somebody who comes over from Germany, who has been there for in past months as well for past hearings, and other people who come from other parts of the country, and it's a sort of a mishmash of people, but they're consistently supporters and demonstrators outside, handing out flyers, holding signs that say beep to free Assange or honk if you support Assange. And you do get you know, I've seen it throughout the day, from morning into the late afternoon, vans, buses, delivery driver people, you know, who do honk their horns. You know, sometimes it might be because the people are standing in the middle of the road and they want to get out of the road. But more often than not, it seems like clear, because I will look into the drivers when I see them honking. I'll look at the drivers when they're driving, and you see people throwing up their fists and what have you, which is interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, unless you have a poll or a survey of the population, it's very difficult to actually gauge or to really appreciate what percentage of the population who have any opinion on a subject, what percentage are leaning one way or another. And that's because, you know, it's the media through which you sort of get an impression of what people's opinions are, but that can be quite distorting because it can be reflective of certain elite perspective rather than mass perspective. So it's on the outside, that's the case. That's the kind of environment. Quite often it's festive. As things get colder, I know it's going to be more difficult, and as it rains more, it'll be more difficult, but they'll find a way. You know, February hearings, it was all rainy. It was very, you know, as you can imagine what it's like in February. So thus far, they've been quite lucky for the weather here. Inside, NGO participation is very difficult. The only reason Reporters Without Borders has been able to generally get in, and even then, it's quite often only for an hour or the second part of the day or what have you. But when they are able to get in, or have been, I've been told by Rebecca Vincent, who's Director of International Affairs or International Campaigns at Reporters Without Borders, that this is because of activists who were there early morning who stood in the queue for the public gallery so that they would then give their spots, right? So, which I think is significant, because you'll also have people, I won't go into details about their names, but you have apparent supporters, I'll put it that way, who are considered to be perhaps a bit more selfish and a bit more eccentric and a bit more questionable. But by and large, and that's all I'm going to say about them. These unnamed group of supporters, I will put in single quotes. But by and large, there are supporters there who are very friendly and helpful towards family members of Julian Assange, as well as towards other members of the public and the NGOs. Amnesty International still hasn't been able to get in. You guys may be aware, or your viewers or listeners may be aware of the fact that when it was all being set up for people trying to get video access, there was a group of NGOs and other observers, including members of the German parliament, were granted permission and then later told this was an error, and then it was all rescinded. I don't know why I'm laughing. Maybe just because of just like the absurdity of it. But,
it's a coping mechanism.
Not because I think it's hilarious. It's just that's hilarious.
Yeah,
You
the
thought you
entire
were gonna be
time
able to
we've
view
been
it, but you're
doing
not.
like our live stream coverage of the hearing. You know, I'm getting up at like 2:30 in the morning. Andrew's getting up at like 4:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, just to make so we're all just sleep deprived, delirious, and fucking out of it while we're doing it. And I had to make a point yesterday to be like, we're laughing because the only alternative is to just
To cry.
scream into the microphone for hours, and it's an absolute coping mechanism.
And I tip my hat off to the American observers, people from the Courage Foundation, Nathan. Oh, I've just forgotten his last name.
Fuller
Fuller from the Courage Foundation, who gets up early in the morning. Rebecca Miles, who produces or co-produces the show for On Contact, Chris Hedges' show On Contact. She's there. I see her, and she gets up very early. She gets up at like 4 a.m. because she gets up, then she does some kind of radio broadcast summarizing bits that or what she was able to cover, and then she goes on and does On Contact, right? So she's just been someone consistently like being there as much as she can. So I tip my hat to them because for these other people, the hours aren't normal hours. For us, at least, it's it's British, British.
Yeah. We've been
I don't know if we
fortunate.
had touched.
We've been fortunate to be joined by Kevin Gostola for the majority of our live streams over the last couple, certainly this past week, and then prior. And
that makes me feel less guilty.
He's in
so.
Chicago. It's it's like 3 o'clock when he has to get up, and it's I don't. The only reason we're doing it is because nobody fucking else is. Like, that's the most frustrating part of it, not necessarily that I enjoy sleep, because I really don't sleep much to begin with, but fuck, dude, like, why in the biggest press freedom trial of certainly the 21st century, why is it, a couple of scruffy bastards in Ohio and California who are doing live coverage of this? Like, it hurts.
I am interested because there was some trouble, and this was before the second round of the court cases started, but with protesters getting cited while they were demonstrating in the UK. Has there been any issues that either of you guys know of about police intervention into the protesters outside of the court?
Other than telling them to like not stand on the street, sometimes, and with a slightly irritated voice, I haven't seen. I haven't heard either. It doesn't mean nothing's happened, but I haven't seen. And I go back and forth between the office because I'm renting an office space 10 minutes away from the court, so that I can go back and forth between the courts, and so I haven't seen or heard anything. Maybe you have, Tarek?
No, I think it's generally been fairly non-eventful in that respect. Just regards to the media thing, I kind of hate to always be the sort of contrarian, but it's kind of been one of those issues that's kind of niggled at me a little bit, because like me and Mo, we're kind of in this cloud video platform, and we can actually see who all the other attendants are. As far as I'm aware, there's at least 2 different rooms of about 20 to 25 people. There might actually be 3. I'm not 100% sure, but there is actually
the numbers have gone quite down though in my room over the last week. To like
mine sort of been consistently around 20, 25, and
oh really? Still, all right.
And to be honest with you, there have been every single day. There's been a reporter from the AP, the Press Association, Reuters, BBC, Daily Mail. It's just, I think what kind of tends to happen is that, well, people don't see a lot of their coverage. And I'm only really aware of this because I've been doing these sort of updates where I'm kind of trying to summarize what the coverage has happened for kind of an email list that I help out with. But there has actually been a lot of media coverage. Obviously, I think with places like Reuters or AP, they're not going to write a story on every little thing that happens in the court. I think they kind of, for them, it's much more of, if it's something involving Trump or, something of like a high political significance, that they'll probably do it. But I think, if you have a look for it, it has been there, and it has been, to the most part, it's been pretty good, I would say, too. Like we had, a story from Reuters saying, the headline was that Assange didn't put sources at risk, which I kind of tweeted out to say I think that was like a really kind of crucial thing, because Reuters will go to every single newsroom in the world, and it's regardless of what you think of it, it's extremely authoritative in its news, so it definitely has an impact. Even The Guardian, I think, have done a number of pieces on it. They did a piece on Friday about how Cryptome was the first to publish, not WikiLeaks. obviously they kind of omitted everything to do with
Yeah,
the password.
quite crucially.
Well, towards the end of the second week, I believe it may have been the cross-examination of Shankman, but the prosecution and the judge were both forced to agree that David Lee was the one who published, like they had to acknowledge that David Lee published the codes and that it was his fault that the unredacted cables got put into the public. Do you think that that has maybe stepped up some pressure in the bigger newsrooms as the literal extradition judge said, yes, it was David Lee that published this first?
Yes, I think, and Mo could probably talk about this a little bit more, but I think this is another one of my kind of pet grievances is when people say it's a show trial, and I absolutely 100% get the sentiment behind that because of everything we've seen over the last few years and certain decisions that Baraitser has made. But I think what's been really good about these hearings is that it's not just lawyers going back and forth and presenting their arguments. They're actually establishing points of fact in the case. So once the lawyers kind of agree on a specific detail, it's like that is the fact that District Judge Vanessa Baraitser will use to make her decision. We've had a lot of things like that where we've had it established that, as a matter of record, that WikiLeaks was not the first to publish those documents. Multiple things like that, which are very much in Julian's favor. And I think my kind of general impression of what's been going on is that there's so many of this kind of intricacies of the WikiLeaks story that is very well known to activists and journalists that have really looked into it, but it's not because of bad journalism in the past or omissions in the past. It's not really been covered. And I think what's happening is that these facts are getting introduced in a very public manner, and a lot of journalists that probably have never spent the time to look into these issues are sort of getting these presented to them on a plate. And and we've had certain exchanges where James Lewis, QC, on behalf of the US government, he's been forced to kind of accept certain facts, and especially towards the end of week 3, I think we've had a lot of very important acknowledgements, and maybe Mo can help me out here with some of what they are, as I'm blanking on.
A couple of the big ones.
Wait,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Mo.
Let me push back on that for a moment, though, because the reason that, at least in my mind, that I keep referring to it as a show trial has a lot to do with the number of prepared statements that Baraitser has brought with her to court, where the debate amongst lawyers is almost like, I don't know, a puppet show, because she had already made up her mind. There have been a couple of concessions by Baraitser that surprised me. But I do agree that because we're so close to it, it's obvious to us, but significantly less obvious to people who haven't been following it as much as we have. However, it shouldn't even be happening. Like the first time that Gustola was on with us, he was like, "I feel like it's Clerks. I shouldn't even be here today." The simple fact of the matter of the UC Global surveillance is on its face enough reason to have this thrown out of court. So it seems, I don't know, cartoonish to me that this process is even ongoing when every single aspect of Julian Assange's civil and human rights have been just trampled on leading up to this. I do, this is something that I really want to get you guys' opinions on. Yesterday, at the very beginning of the hearing, there was a conversation that took place between Baraitser and Megabrain and Fitzgerald about, reaching a decision or having closing arguments prior to the U.S. election. This was Baraitser openly admitting in court that this is a political trial, a political hearing. And that, of course, violates the U.S.-UK extradition treaty. Are people like, have you seen people jump on that? Are they drawing the same conclusion that I drew? Is that really an admission by Baraitser that this hearing is a purely political nature?
Not quite. She was part of the issue is about the, which is a problem that, well, an issue that the judge and the prosecution have raised, is of the defense introducing new evidence, right, and making new submissions. And the question of like, okay, are you going to argue now that if we continue, if there are further delays, because the defense wanted a month before making closing arguments, right? And she was saying, no, basically you'll get the Monday and the Tuesday after the weekend. And then eventually that moved down to the Thursday and the Friday, the week of week 5, right? And so part of the issue was, okay, so let's say there's the elections. Is the elections then potentially going to influence further evidence from you? What if it's a different administration that gets elected? Does that mean you're going to make now different arguments, etc.? And actually, the defense had to leave it open slightly. They said depends on the circumstances. So it was interesting though that they were. I couldn't hear exactly every aspect of the election discussion, but it was interesting to hear them discuss. And ultimately, they all agreed that when she makes her decision, it will be after the election results anyway. So they all agreed ultimately it wouldn't matter. And that worked in the defense's favor when they, amazingly, Ed Fitzgerald was able to get her from the position of absolutely not, closing arguments are going to be made, and week 5, you're going to finish week 4, you're going to finish on Friday of week 4, which is the end of next week, and then closing arguments, you're going to have 2 days, and that's when it's going to be it. And then by the time, within less than 10 minutes, Fitzgerald ended up getting her to say, okay, fine, you get a month. You get, what was it, 4 weeks? Which is impressive, because I was watching it happen as I was typing up, preparing a tweet, and I was preparing a tweet saying, it looks like Mr. Fitzgerald is slowly being able to convince her, and I wasn't even able to send it, because eventually she did end up, like, being convinced. And part of the issue was like, okay, well, my decision will be after the election. And they did say, look, it's not going to be fair. There's too many things that have happened, and we're working around the clock. We haven't had access to our client face-to-face in 6 months. That's not his fault. COVID isn't his fault. And actually, he said something that I almost actually thought was cheeky, but she didn't think it was cheeky, which was, he said, to be fair, you actually gave us a date once. You proposed for the date to start in November for part 2 of the hearings, and we're still in September. So technically, you know, we're still we're still doing all right. Actually, we'll be finishing before the, you know, your proposed date. I remember thinking, yeah, okay, but you guys didn't end up. The case wasn't heard in November. But she didn't say anything about that. And at one point she said, look, I have to be mindful of the fact that your client remains in Belmarsh prison and pretrial detention. And this is something that I have to be mindful of when making a decision about further delays to the conclusion of this case. And he responded immediately, yes, well, my lady, you could rectify that problem immediately by granting him bail.
Yep.
I thought that was the best line that Fitzgerald pulled out that whole day.
Yeah, that was good. And she's like, yes, well. So I think that helped, Matt. She didn't say anything beyond yes, well.
Even the prosecution,
well, that's not going to happen.
even the prosecution was laughing, to be honest with you. And just to give like a little bit of further insight to that, because on Friday I actually was inside the Old Bailey as opposed to using the video conferencing, because I was having so many technical issues that I pretty much just said, fuck this, I'm going to be inside the courtroom. I mean, I was in the sort of annex next door where we're getting the live feed, but I figured sort of one live feed was better than, because on the video conferencing you're essentially being fed the live feed from the court through another facility to get it to us through the internet, with people coming in from all over the world. So I just thought, at least I know for sure that the video feed in the courtroom will be much better. And I actually kind of overheard a conversation between Fitzgerald and Lewis before they had that discussion. And what kind of a lot of people might not realize is they're actually like very pally with each other, even though they're on kind of complete opposite sides of this. And I think sort of Fitzgerald kind of almost put his arm around Lewis and he just says, you know, can you just tell Baraitser something about it's in the interest of justice? And then I didn't really know what they were talking about at the time. And then I noticed later, Lewis was actually like, we agree with the defense that it's in the interest of justice to have this delayed by 4 weeks. So it's kind of interesting to sort of see that dynamic play out and how it, can really affect what, because also the other thing is that a lot of people may not kind of realize off the bat is that actually so much of what's being presented to us in the courtroom has already been agreed between the two lawyers. So in terms of what evidence can be presented and what can't, and things like, factual things of that nature, a lot of that has already been agreed beforehand. And I think what's been sort of interesting, actually, and sort of building off what I was saying before, is that I think more and more it's kind of becoming apparent that Lewis is kind of, he's regardless of what you think of him, he is a very good extradition lawyer for the government who's been doing this for 35 years. But I think like
I'm a high court judge as well. A high court judge as well. Yeah.
I think
he threw in Baritz's face at one point. Were you there? Were you watching that when he threw in her face when she's like, never as an extradition, never as a barrister in all my years, or nor as a high court judge for that matter, have I ever had to deal with. And he was trying to bully her into a particular position. To her credit, she didn't end up doing it. It didn't work in his favor at the time. Sorry to interrupt. So just remember that. Go ahead.
I was just trying to remember what I was going to say, but
as a 35-year experienced extradition lawyer.
But I think what's happening is that the sort of the nature of the US allegation is so weak and it's built on so much lies that I think by the end of the third week, we actually had, and we'll go into this a little bit more, we had this really interesting moment where I think it was right after the Jennifer Robinson statement where we kind of got a lot more, and again, the US government had to read a statement out, essentially they read a statement out where they had to say, yes, we accept this as factual evidence. And now, that's a point of record that this meeting took place. And what was really interesting is that District Judge Baraitser actually asked Lewis for the UK charges, I believe. And for me, that was like, that's a very fundamental, basic element of this case. I think, I forget what form it is, Mo, but it's the sort of like the extra, it's essentially like she asked for the original, or like the kind of extradition request, which is like the most basic document in this thing. And Lewis kind of looked at her like, you want this document? Like in confusion. And she was like, yes. And it was like, to me, that was kind of a signal of things are sort of shifting where, because by the end of that day, it was very clear that we'd established that so many things that WikiLeaks hadn't published first, they hadn't endangered the lives of sources and informants. We had people like John Sloboda, who talked about the very technical aspects that WikiLeaks took. John Goetz and Nikki Hager, who talked about different precautions that were taken, and lots of discussions about the Guardian password, so on. And I think that's kind of the position that we're in. That, and I guess that's kind of why I don't want to have this attitude that it's a foregone conclusion. I mean, obviously, if a negative result happens at the end of the day, I'll be, of course, just as angry and as pissed off as everyone. But I think, we're here, and this is the best opportunity that Julian's going to get to defend himself on all the factual parts of the case. So I think, the next week will be very important, and we just have to sort of keep our guard up and keep our hopes up, I guess.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead.
I don't think extradition's a foregone conclusion. Like, I don't think it's 100% they're going to sweep them away and throw them in ADX or Gitmo or MCC or what have you. I just think that it is, without immense public pressure and awareness of the situation, the chances of a fair trial for whatever it is and whatever that would be are non-existent. But I think that there has been, at least in a way, enough public pressure made that the judge now has to hesitate and find ways to almost give herself an out if there is a position where she decides to not listen to the State Department. And that's what I think that question about the political tide in the U.S. was yesterday, because that was followed up by QC Lewis essentially just dropping the ball and getting into a technical conversation with a forensics expert about Windows XP patches. So Lewis, in and of himself, I feel, isn't even well prepared for this case.
Oh, can I pull up the memes
Yes.
and shit now? Okay, so I'm going to show you guys the evolution of Lewis's the mega brain thing.
So on Lewis's own website, there's a wonderful quote that we've been having fun with just as everything has gotten kind of dark last week. And Lewis himself describes himself as a charming man with a mega brain.
So there's that.
No,
Right.
that's a quote. That's a quote from Chambers UK.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
That's a quote from the book. There's a book which is a collection of names of a collection of barristers lists, and they get ranked. So it's called Chambers UK. That's the 2018 edition. So somebody has described him as that.
So there's
presumably
there's
not himself, and that's being put on his website. Just in defense of being fair.
And then because of Lewis's Lilliputian stature, there's this one. And then a beautiful human in the A4A Discord decided to put it into GIF form to illustrate this.
No comment.
Mega brain.
But
I just want to be on record with agree, because I'm going to have to leave in a minute, unfortunately.
Oh, that's
so I just want to be on the record of concurring with my oh my God, I've just forgotten the word that you used, contrarian colleague. Yes, I'm going to concur with my contrarian colleague that my understanding, including via the legal team or via sources connected to the legal team, but also based on how the extradition treaty with the US is signed, as well as the position of the judge, is that the presumption is in favor of extradition. That is the nature of the extradition treaty with the United States. There is a presumption in favor of extradition, and is up to the defense to establish why their defendant falls into one of the rare few exceptions to extradition. And also in terms of the judge, there's a belief that the judge is movable, but it is going to take a lot to be able to get her there. And that's why, that's why there's this back and forth. There's also an assessment, and I can't say who the various people that this assessment comes from, but there's various people that she's not necessarily brave. That you don't get the sense of like that experience in these types of specific types of it's almost unprecedented, as people have mentioned, just the level that's going into this case. But the more brave you are, the less you're concerned about being promoted perhaps to higher levels of the judiciary, the more that you can feel more free, as it were, to make certain decisions. Before I was in journalism, one of the final cases I worked on was involved in bringing over the Miami Five, who were Cuban spies, as it were, anti-terror spies, if you like, who infiltrated these far-right terrorist groups in Miami in the United States. They revealed what they had discovered. They were literally carrying out terrorist attacks against civilian targets in Cuba, right? They revealed the information they had to the FBI via a source, and in the end they were the only ones who were arrested, prosecuted, and convicted of failing to register as foreign agents, and faced decades, including life sentences. Right now, they ended up being released under the Obama-Cuba deal after spending many years in prison. And there's a law in this country which prohibits people coming to the UK if they've been sentenced to more than a certain number of years. I can't remember if it's 10 years in prison, right, to an offense of more than 10 years in prison. And all of them had. And various unions and solidarity groups that had been supportive of their cause for many decades, for a couple of decades, wanted them to come over here. And so we were on the case to bring them over here. And in the end, granted, this was in the Court of Appeal, but we lost in the normal immigration courts. It got to the Court of Appeal. It was a three-panel judges, three-panel sitting at the Court of Appeal. Sometimes you'll just get one. And it was a conservative. These are very conservative judges, especially the chief in the center that had the most sway. And we won the case to bring them over, and they were able to come over under a political exception, right? There was an exception. So just because there was a conservative judge didn't mean sometimes actually that helped. You know what I mean? A conservative establishment judge with that old school paternalistic sort of outlook in terms of civil liberties and what have you, even though they are more right leaning, but who doesn't feel pressure not to make a decision in a particular way, or is able to resist said pressure, and isn't necessarily hoping that one day they'll end up at the Supreme Court. Granted, any appeals from here would go to the High Court and then the Supreme Court, but there is a similar kind of dynamic that so it's not just what we might expect from this judge. There's a potential appeal to the High Court, potential to the Supreme Court, and then potentially thereafter to the European Court of Human Rights. So it's just good that people remember that it's not just this hearing process here.
So,
well,
Mo,
Mo,
I
I
really-
know you got to run. I thank you for joining us today and for your time. And as always, we appreciate your input, and we will do whatever we can to help share your work. Will you please tell people where they can find you?
Yes, I'll be trolling Tariq Haddad on Twitter, so you can find me there. At M Elmazi, so that's just M for Muhammad. Elmazi is my last name, ELMAAZI. And then if you, I've been covering the hearings for Sputnik, so on average 1 article a day for Sputnik. If you type in my name into Google, you'll also find various things. But on my Twitter profile, all the various links are there and that I'm associated with, groups I'm associated with.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Mo. We know everything's been crazy busy, and I hope you get a chance to get some rest this weekend before court picks back up on Monday.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Sorry I couldn't stay longer this time.
Oh,
all
it's
good.
perfectly fine.
Have a good weekend.
You had talked a little bit about the technical issues and the problems that were happening in regards to that. I'm doing a write-up of the court from the perspective of the people sending the tweets out and sourcing them together. And between the first week and Monday of the second week, there was 12 separate instances of technical issues being reported by the people watching the cloud video platform. Could you talk a little bit about some of the technical issues you've seen and experienced while viewing this?
Yeah, I think there's so many sort of different elements in terms of like the different pieces that all have to kind of join up together for it to kind of work. So obviously you have the witnesses that are kind of dialing in from all over the world, and then you've got the sort of internal court video conferencing, which has to, you know, feed into another courtroom for the journalists and the observers, and then, you know, the people that are the journalists are watching at home. You know, so you never really know where the kind of issue can come from. Sometimes it's been that on the witnesses' end, the microphone's been bad, or you know, their internet connection's been bad. You know, sometimes it's probably just been kind of things on my end. But we've had, you know, a lot of that you can sort of misattribute, or you can attribute that to just bad luck and so, but there have been other incidents where it's kind of been a little bit more, what's the right word, kind of fucked up is the only thing that comes to mind. You know, we had the incident with sort of Kevin Gustolo, so I'm sure you've heard about that or talked about it before.
Yeah.
He, just because it was taking a long time to load up, he, because we all have to be there before 9:40 in the morning before the 10 o'clock start. So, you know, they had some kind of just issues loading, and a few of us had issues loading. I think I've managed to get into the room at like 9:39 after sort of being on there for about 20-15 minutes trying to get on. And so, you know, I just managed to get in, and then I kind of saw on Twitter that Kevin was having some problems. And in the past, they've been fairly reasonable in terms of if you have technical issues and you miss the cutoff, they do let you in, or if you drop off and come back on, they're usually pretty good. But I think also we have to remember that all the different core staff that are helping, are changing every day, and it's not always the same people. And I think that particular day, the woman that was in charge just wanted to follow the guidelines to a T, to the point that it was sort of ridiculous, because one of the guidelines, for example, that we're told is that we're not allowed to use the chat function in the room unless it was for technical difficulties. And most people have observed that, we're not kind of idly chatting away. But that day that Kevin had his technical issues getting in the room, Nathan Fuller mentioned something about it, and then she kind of essentially told them off for, she said something along the lines of, you can only raise technical issues regarding yourself, you can't raise it for other people. And then that kind of annoyed me, and I sent another response to what she said, just saying, with all due respect, Kevin's been covering this for the last 2 weeks every single morning, he's always been on time. Can you please just be a bit accepting and let him back in the room? And she just said, very bluntly, like, this is the last time you can, otherwise I'll kick you both out of the room for the day.
There will be no camaraderie here.
And that was just very ridiculous. But I think, there's certain people, that possess these core positions, or, you probably get it at supermarkets and stuff, and you've seen it all with the COVID restrictions, where they kind of just love that authoritarian power to be able to tell you no, and it's like used for their day. But I think with that particular incident, so many people have made a fuss about it on Twitter that it was sort of sorted out kind of by lunchtime, which is not ideal, but I get, it happens. And I think, trying to think if there's been other sort of significant issues. For me personally, it's just been, I think it's probably been on my end more than anything, but I've been sort of dropping in and out on the call, so it's like, and it can take sort of 30 seconds to get back in, or so you sort of can miss important passages. But like I said, I've kind of just decided to be in the actual call room itself, which I probably had the option to do, but I don't know if I told you guys this, but like at one of the earlier hearings before this started, I broke my laptop. Arriving, like literally as I arrived to court, I smashed a water bottle all over it, and so that's kind of, and I just, in terms of being productive and get stories out there and get tweets out there, I want, like, having an actual computer with you instead of on a phone is helpful. So that's why I kind of elected to do the first couple of weeks at home, but there is a lot of stuff that you miss, and it's also nice to be able to talk to the lawyers and people like Kristen and Joseph Farrell from WikiLeaks to kind of, bounce things off and kind of get clarification, and also you just get, more of an idea of what's kind of going on behind the scenes, like I was telling you, with those interactions between Lewis and Fitzgerald and things like that. You just miss those if you're not there. So it's that's what I plan to do going forward.
We had a question in one of the chats. Back in February, there was a contingent of yellow vests that were marching with Assange supporters. Are they back this time around?
I have not seen them, but I would not say there's not.
We can probably find out from Allie Mae.
Yeah.
True. We need to get her on one of these.
No, I hit her up last night. I'm gonna try to live stream one of their events next week.
Okay.
I mean, there have been people wearing yellow vests, but I don't know if they are officially
Right.
the yellow vest.
Let me hear your accent.
Yeah. I'm going IDing different people.
So I'm sorry, Tarek. You're in Mo's camera spot, so I apologize about that. It switched around on me. I know I'm bad with names. I wanted to say, as someone, you coming from a mainstream outlet to now being a independent, as it were, journalist, do you see any type of like institutional barriers or censorship issues on a personal level that maybe you didn't experience when you were working with a large institution covering national security issues, but most specifically like Julian's situation as it is?
Well, I guess what you're probably alluding to is the sort of 2 days of health reports that we talked about, and psychiatrist reports. So those were kind of a weird 2-3 days actually, because, and like we sort of discussed on the air before, I think it affected a lot of people very negatively. And actually, I was kind of having a discussion with some of the journalists in the courtroom yesterday about, because we had also another thing that has been discussed. I don't know if there was much chat about it on Twitter, but the journalists are making an official application to get the physical report by Dr. Kopelman, who is Julian Assange's psychiatrist. Some people might see that as kind of overly intrusive, but I think personally it's something for me. I would, be really great to have that document, just because I was having a lot of technical issues that day. So I had a lot of notes that are sort of scattered, and in terms of kind of piecing together a factual narrative in terms of like what really took place. For example, one thing I'd love to do is kind of document when all the different visits took place, and but I understand that there's obviously very private details in there. But as we sort of made clear to the judge in our kind of application, because all the journalists, which was kind of a nice moment of solidarity actually, was kind of, we discussed together, because we had to present our reasons why we should have this document essentially. And one of the things that we talked about is that we'd already just had to make a lot of editorial judgment in terms of reporting these issues. Obviously, in the UK here, when we're trained, and usually at an editorial level, there's a lot of things that you're usually not allowed to discuss in terms of suicide and things like that. And so like things like methodology and things like that are usually best avoided. And kind of interestingly, like, and kind of to go back what I was saying before, I mean, one of the reasons for that is that having these things public is kind of, it can encourage other people, and it kind of can lead to, ideation of these types of ideas. But I think on a personal level, like, they really, really kind of affected me over the last few days. And I guess I've been sort of umming and ahhing about sort of writing an apology on Twitter for, I haven't been able to write anything for the last few days, but basically it was just sort of, a lot of it was so dark that when I got to actually write about it, I kind of would break down into tears, or I'd just have to like go for a cigarette and just like not do it, just because it was like, I mean, there's a lot of background to this in terms of like, I've got some personal relationship with some of this stuff, and like younger siblings that are kind of going through mental health stuff at the moment as well. So it's, there's a lot of, and I'm sure for a lot of people they have similar things. So it's been difficult to write about it. But
well, one of the moments, because those Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were particularly hard and particularly dark, even for someone like Steve and I, that dark humor is kind of our thing. That was still amazingly hard to get through.
I fucking wept like a fucking kid with a skin knee when I left here on my way to work, like every fucking day, dude.
Yeah, I had to go and literally just sleep for 2 hours after we did the reporting. But there was one particular thing that kind of added some light to that whole thing, and I think it was on Tuesday or maybe Wednesday. But QC Lewis asked the witness, does your lack of eye contact with me show that you have symptoms of Asperger's, in so many words? And that was something that we thought was particularly ridiculous, to even ask a witness if they had Asperger's syndrome. So I was just wondering if you had maybe a little more to highlight that exchange, and if there was something that maybe we missed out of context there, because that was like the thing that broke into the hilarity out of that whole conversation, was literally the prosecution for the United States asking a witness if he had autism.
And I can't remember the verbatim, but his response was excellent, and we kind of just put him in his place. But and again, just to show that you do really miss a lot when you're not really in the courtroom. So obviously, I think he was speaking it had gone over lunch. And this, the psychiatrist is obviously like very senior, very, he's done a lot of different court cases. And so, there's sort of 3 different things that are pretty funny about this. And I remember actually, despite being like very depressed, I burst out completely laughing when this happened for like 5 minutes. I couldn't even stop as I was writing. But so we had the lunch break, and Dr. Kopelman was standing in the witness box for a few hours, and they'd offered him a chair at the beginning, and he kind of refused because it was a small, awkward chair. And then in the lunchtime, Mr. Charming Lewis kind of was like, you know, very British gentleman, like he was doing, and to be fair, he was being like a lovely gentleman. He was like, oh no, we have to get you a chair. And he was like, and he essentially went and got him a chair himself. And, you know, being an absolute gentleman, he's like, oh, thank you so much. Oh, not at all, anytime, all this sort of stuff. And then sort of berates comes back in the room after lunchtime. And then he just starts like going so hard at him, like in the most aggressive tone. So it's just so funny. But like I was saying, this guy is obviously, he's done his fair share of giving evidence in courtrooms in high-profile cases, and he kind of, you know, it didn't bother him at all. And I think they're used to having this sort of dynamic where they're very amicable 1 minute, and then once court starts, it's you know, at each other's throats.
If I'm not mistaken, his response to that was, you know, is your lack of well, you're not making eye contact with me. Does that mean you're autistic? He was like, well, I can't make eye contact with you because you're over there furiously shuffling papers and looking around the room. It's not going to be possible.
That was Mary Kostakidis inserting.
Oh, that was her editorial?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what the witness actually said was something along the lines of, while I'm reading the body language and emotional presentation of both you, the judge, and the defense, I have not been tested, but I'm sure I would not score very high if I were. It was something very like Python kind of answer.
That's right. Yeah. It was Mary that was fucking going deep in the paint with the snark.
Mm-hmm. And there was just another interesting moment that happened that I don't know was widely reported, and I was sort of expecting this to make some headlines actually, but even though it was a sort of kind of a cheap shot moment, but essentially because one aspect of the US prosecution, they were kind of very ridiculously trying to claim that Julian Assange would only get 5 to 6 years, and if this was the case, they were asking the psychiatrist, like, would this not have an impact on his mental health? Because obviously, like, a lot of mental health is dependent on your what you're expecting for your future prospects. And they were saying if it's kind of a 5 or 6 year sentence instead of you know, 30 or life or whatever it would be, you know, would that change? And he was saying yes, that would considerably change things, but you know, I've had experience in dealing with prosecutors on behalf of the US government, and the US government all the time give these promises of jail conditions or what the sentence will be. And he said, last time I was stood in this witness box, I was getting told how safe the MCC was, and that was the exact same day that Jeffrey Epstein died. So it was kind of like, you know, another one of those moments where you kind of really put him in his place, really. And that psychiatrist was actually, you know, he was extremely, like, you could tell that he was extremely intelligent and well versed in what he was talking about. So it was another one of those many little instances that kind of was, you know, had gone in Julian's favor. And I think once he'd given his evidence, there was, you know, it had moved a lot of people, especially because of the very graphic nature of the things that we heard. Because I think a lot of people, especially myself included, to be honest, I have to admit that when I was sitting through the hearings in February and we had the skeleton arguments, you know, towards the very end, we saw that the lawyers had this, one of their arguments was going to be that the high risk of suicide for Julian, that if he was to be extradited. And obviously I kind of understood that, you know, that definitely could be a possibility, especially if you're facing, you know, life in prison. But it was just, for me, I was kind of, my initial sort of knee-jerk reaction was to be like, is this really the case that you should be making? And is it just like a kind of a legal attempt to try and get out of this, very terrible sort of prosecution? But and I think, and I'm someone who's extremely supportive of Julian, and so I can't imagine what other people that maybe like journalists or on the fence or journalists from the Guardian or the BBC, like what they would have thought when they heard that. But when we saw and heard the evidence this week, it was really like there was no real you couldn't deny the evidence, and like the fact that Assange had been charged with having a concealed blade in prison and had been hoarding medication, things like that. It's it's that really kind of put it into perspective for people. Like, no, these things are real. He is really suffering in there. The things that he talked about were documented contemporaneously by his psychiatrist. It's like, no, this is really happening. And actually, another, sorry to blab on and on and on, but one of the interesting things that the psychiatrist had said is that he was with him just after Chelsea Manning had attempted suicide. And Assange made this remark of like, wow, the fact that she would do this just a few days before she was going to get this pardon really shows you how terrible those conditions are. And I think, knowledge of that for Julian is something that's sort of playing a big part in it. Yeah, that was all.
And I think it not to go off on a separate thing, but it shows how far the U.S. has fallen in terms of domestic prison policy, like the use of special administrative measures and things like that Steve and I have gone through. That there's literally a domestic torture program that you can't even challenge in court, because while you're involved in it, you can only appeal at the most once per year, if not longer between it. So I think I think Julian's case in particular highlights so many other issues around the world and with U.S. detention programs and even the UK detention program, because we know that going into September 7th, he hadn't met with his attorneys in 6 months. And before that, he was under video surveillance inside the prison. Like if he wanted to speak with them, he had to do it through a video link, which is a very non-secure method of communication.
And it put his health at risk potentially to use that video.
And then UC Global going back 3 years before that into 2016, 2017. So it's been conservatively, you could say the better part of 3 to 4 years since Julian's been able to have a private legal conversation.
Real quick, there. Oh, go ahead. But there's a chat question for Tarek, and I don't know how much more time Tarek has with us. So,
I was just going to ask: do you think that should be a consideration in this case? Do you think that the fact that we haven't seen UC Global enter into this extradition hearing yet is a bad thing, and how they could actually get it introduced?
As far as I'm aware, it's going to be introduced this coming week. So that will be, there's again, there's deliberations. Well, the interesting thing is that the prosecution is arguing to not be able to admit this evidence, and that issue hasn't been resolved yet. But I think there's two employees from the Ecuadorian embassy. Were employed by the government of Ecuador that essentially whistle blew on the activity. So I think we're trying to have statements from them. And also there is a statement of Aitor Martinez, who is Julian's lawyer in Spain, and they've been dealing with that case in the Spanish High Court. And I think his statement would be giving that. So I think that's something that we can expect to either have some debate about or hopefully look forward to. But again, that will be a very significant thing. And also just to kind of go off the back of that, what was also interesting was that we obviously had Daniel Ellsberg on, and what was interesting to know about that is obviously he kind of raised the issue of him being spied on with his psychiatrist, I believe it was, or some physician of some sort, I can't remember. And that definitely had sway in the argument, but also just a kind of interesting side note, it was the most berates had actually, you could see that she was very reverent of Daniel Ellsberg. Like when he came on, she was like so extremely like polite and nice to him.
Yeah.
And, so thankful that he was there that like, even, I don't know if factually these things will make much of a difference, but it's, it shows that she does respect people like that. And
we picked up on that just from reading the live tweets.
Mm-hmm.
That her whole tone personage really changed.
And Lewis did as well, to his credit. For as much as Lewis likes to try to box in court, when Ellsberg was there, he didn't raise any type of objections to time that was being used. He didn't try to cut him off mid-sentence to ask other questions like we've seen him do with other witnesses. So as much as I hate to say it, I'm really glad that the prosecution was respectful during that time, because it was something that was very out of character for them. But Ellsberg did get to do a really good job. And then subsequently, that story, Ellsberg being in court, was one of very few that did get the chance to circulate through independent media.
Well, and media, period.
Yeah.
But you would find that the more mainstreamish, quote unquote indie channels, like that was the first real thing they picked up on was, shit, Daniel Ellsberg's both alive and testifying. We didn't know, real quick though, Tarek, from Big Rob in our chat, who's been a wonderful human being throughout the entire, I guess, process of these vigils and whatnot. Do you feel the public mood changing from ignorant disbelief to informed anger, like on the ground in the UK in general? You did mention that the UK outlets are doing a much better job of covering this story, certainly than the ones here in the US are. The US has spent more time on the letters submitted demanding Julian's release by current and former heads of state and other NGOs, and then they have the trial period. But is there a sentiment of a shift, I guess, on the ground?
Yeah, it's like really hard to kind of say specifically, like, because it's obviously like once you're at the court and things like that, the only people that you really see there are, or overwhelmingly, are the supporters. But like Mo was saying before, like we have these signs of people hold up for like honk for Assange and beat for Assange, that kind of thing. And these things, these signs have been sort of present throughout, and they've been held up. My general impression is that there are more beeps coming. I don't know if that's because we're in central London and there's a lot more traffic, but it is actually like it is impressive, and it is always encouraging. Like you do get a lot of beeping on the road.
We found that was similar. We were in front of the British Embassy a few times when we were in DC, twice when I was there, and we had similar signage. And yeah, I mean, you would progressively hear more and more and more, and it's one of those things where honking is contagious anyway, But on top of that, you're fairly anonymous when you're in your vehicle. And
right.
You can show support that you wouldn't ordinarily show because of being stigmatized in the years of bullshit and smears and lies about Julian Assange and about WikiLeaks. Mm-hmm. So you're presented with both an opportunity for a measure of anonymity as well as, the ability to lay on your horn, which I think everyone who's been behind the wheel of a car has been like, yeah, let's do it. I personally, every time that I drive through a tunnel, at least here in California, while my children are in the car because it embarrasses the hell out of them, I lay on the horn for the duration of the tunnel. And you will always get a number of other vehicles that join in it, and it's just it's an exercise of pure silliness, but also quite fun.
It's good to know. Yeah, I concur with that. That's completely. Yeah, I don't know what more to say about that.
So we are winding down. I know you said you only had about an hour with us. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity for some final thoughts about the case so far and maybe what you expect out of next week and where people can find you and your work.
Well, finally, just thanks for having me on as always. Always nice to see you guys, and you guys do so much work that I think you guys should get a bit of appreciation as well. In terms of next week, I think, like you said, we should have a little bit of coverage about UC Global. I think we are still expecting Noam Chomsky, which will be interesting as well. Maybe one of those kind of Ellsberg moments as well. Even though I can't imagine any newspaper outlet trying to quote Chomsky because.
Well, now that he's telling people to vote for Joe Biden, they might give him some column inches.
Okay, yeah, I probably won't be. You know, he is a legend, and
he's done good work. We'll leave it at that.
You know, let's not kick a man when he's and
94 and has actually done some shit to help move the needle in a positive direction. I agree.
Yeah, and like I can almost guarantee you that when I'm that old, I will have some terrible political views.
Oh, big save. I think all of us will.
Yeah. If they're not bad enough as they are.
If I make it to 74, I will probably be on permanent house arrest because I have only become more radicalized as I age.
You're gonna have like some like permanent fucking ankle bracelet or something.
Right.
That's called a cell phone, Josh.
Every time I have a thought,
Nah, he won't be able to remove it.
Up a gun, like people show up at my house. Yeah.
It's gonna be.
Thank you very much, Tarek. If you could, I'll let people know where they can find you.
So website is TarekHaddad.com. I'll spell that out because no one can spell my name. TarekHaddad.com, and then it's my full name, Tarek_Haddad at Twitter. And yeah, thanks to you guys again. Hope to chat to you soon.
Thank you.
Well, shit.
I don't know if we have. Thank you. I don't know if we have much more news prepared for today, honestly.
No, oh fuck, I meant to ask him something. Oh well, I can do that.
It's called the email.
Yeah. I mean, I can always call him if I really want to. But no, I can wonder aloud if we're ever going to get court transcripts.
Oh, that's a damn good question.
I mean,
I would hope at the very least that we could get transcripts. That might be something that we have to do a coordinated Freedom of Information Act request for, because they do have a pretty good Freedom of Information system in the UK. As long as you're not trying to inquire about national security issues.
We should ask Katya's Compass. She might know.
Yeah. We could even maybe ask Stefania Maruzzi for a little guidance on that too. Because she's done a lot of successful Freedom of Information Act requests out there.
Very true.
Yeah.
But while we have a lull here, down below in the description, we have, I think it's 6 different calls to action. I'm going to be pulling out new ones for this week, just because those ones we have been going on for so long. If you have already done them, please do it a second time. It's just a few emails that you'll have to send out. Everything's pretty well organized once you start reading through it. So please take a moment and get those knocked out if you can. It's everything from congressional candidates to every member of the Australian Parliament to the Department of Justice to every email and complaint line for the UK's prison systems. So please push those in there. There are ways that we will be able to do Freedom of Information Act requests to see those complaints and then also why there wasn't responses to them. But yeah, so hop in on that. Did we have more we wanted to go through, Steve?
No,
'Cause we-
but let me add to that too, because I know that we're mostly speaking to people who are already activists or people who I know that there are some content creators and some journalists that watch this program. And while we're on the subject of freedom of information requests, like, you can be heads and shoulders above 95% of the entire journalistic community if you dedicate yourself to FOIs and the all of the like surrounding, I suppose is the right word, research and history about FOIs. Like, that's one avenue that, because it's mostly ridiculously time consuming and uses a lot of legalese, most people shy away from. But if you were looking for a way to outshine the vast majority of the people in that field, that would be a way to do it.
Absolutely. And we may, as a community, try one, or a few or something, but that's something that we'll probably end up crossing later down the road. One of the things to expect next week for the calls to action is trying to get copies of the actual court proceedings in video form released to the public. So that'll be something that we start doing next week and then continue through the month of October and on until we get a response. So that will be something that we can all look forward to there. But I just want to give real quick MCSC Network a shout out, because Nico is letting us host the vigils on here. So I really, really appreciate that. But we also simulcast onto Twitch, Facebook, and our Action for Assange YouTube channel. We did basically get censored off of Periscope to where this show does not play, Slim Newsday does not play. It'll still
I haven't
like
had
it goes
any.
live. But we literally just can't broadcast onto those platforms. We tried for weeks and weeks and then just gave up because it was more time than it was worth. If you would like and you have a channel, we have no technical problems setting up a multicast. So that's something that we could put up and stream to other channels as well, like we are with this one. So that's always just an interesting thing, because you never really know who's watching. That is a very easy thing to set up, a simulcast. So
Shout out to Nico.
Yes.
Shout out to Nico.
yes, absolutely love him for helping us out. But do we want to close up, Steve, or do we want to do maybe a little AMA with the chat to see if anyone has any questions?
Yeah,
about...
if anybody has any questions, go ahead and throw them. I would also like to give a thank you to Kim.com for just following me on Twitter. If you're watching, you're welcome on this program anytime. Please contact me. We'd love to talk to you.
Yes, please do.
But outside of that, man, I want to. There's a number of people that I feel like we should thank and give credit to while we're in that sort of vein of conversation here. And I will reiterate the big ups to Nico House, because this isn't something that like Nico and I have talked a lot over the last several months, and this isn't something that the bulk of his audience really like got into or cared or gave a fuck about before. You know, Nico was talking about it pretty consistently, and now that the Convo Couch is talking about it pretty consistently, it's allowed for an entirely new segment of the independent media audience to become more informed and also get activated. Like, we're starting to see movement out of that crowd, and I'm incredibly grateful for that, because our audience is I know for a fact, based on YouTube analytics, significantly older. So it fucking rocks, and I'm really, really stoked about it.
And we're going to be moving on to This is something that we're coordinating behind the scenes as we get it launched, because we don't just want to start and then have to chase content as we do it. We are going to be launching a TikTok. So that's going to be pretty exciting to be able to reach out to another generation,
I am
essentially.
significantly less excited about being on TikTok.
I mean, I just don't want to have to make more stuff because it's already.
I am
my
also
life
not
is already
excited.
So compressed. But TikTok has 1.4 billion, if not more, views for the anonymous hashtag. So there is a community of young people that understand that everything's fucked right now. So the goal is to reach them where they're at instead of just expecting them to find some old people on YouTube chit-chatting. So hopefully that'll grow into something.
Yeah, it's been nice
Can you
seeing
get
more
more info
people.
on
Like
the-
like even on my own timeline and stuff. Like even in the last month or two, like I've seen a lot of people that either I followed or followed me that didn't really talk about Assange. Even they're starting to talk about Assange. So that's it's good to see.
And pressure from all angles is a wonderful thing. If you know people involved in media or politics or anything in your regular life, ask them to do something for Julian, or just inform them about his situation. One of the things that we as a community, as the Action for Assange community, and those who identify as someone that cares about the free press, one of the things that we do need to start doing again is reaching back out to city councils. Leading up to Julian's situation and court hearing, that's something that we were doing, but it's something that I think we'll start doing again. Just because Melbourne and so many places in Australia have spoken up in favor of him, and it creates uncensored local press to where it forces a newspaper to run a story about Julian.
Keep in mind too,
because the
there's
city
like
council did
we
something.
don't even really have city council meetings here yet.
It's true,
Well,
and
and-
most of them are taking place in a Zoom meeting style.
Yeah, so it's not as easy as
yeah.
it was before.
Real quick
Well,
though,
here
because
in
I was in
Ohio,
the
we
middle
still
of
have
thanking a
real
bunch of people, I would like to continue doing that, and I'm going to use Kevin Gastola's article here that he wrote in order to do that. So let's get down to the meat and taters of it. And of course, man, just huge thanks to Consortium News. Not only do I learn something every time I listen to one of Joe's recaps, I cackle when I hear him pronounce WikiLeaks, and I'll just leave it at that. I WikiLeaks, it's fucking hilarious, dude. It's great.
I love it.
And Kathy Vogan, who produces CN Live, she's been incredibly supportive of Action for Assange. She always tags at least one of us in CN's press release and updates and stuff like that. And of course Elizabeth Voss is fantastic and has been a guest here in the past few times and has been on my show a number of times, and I love her. So thanks to CN. We've got James Dolman, who I am less familiar with, but I have, because of this article, I've checked out a few of the things that he's done, and he's somebody that I would like to contact and try and bring onto the vigil here.
I think Byline is actually the website where I get a good amount of the documents from. Between Cryptome and Byline, most of the court documents that are public are up there. And Byline has almost every witness statement, I believe, public to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Those were the ones that I downloaded before I deleted everything on my phone on Monday.
Big Mo, who was just with us here earlier in the broadcast. Bill Goodwin is the investigations editor for Computer Weekly. Computer Weekly is behind a paywall, and that's the only qualm I have with it. Otherwise, he's done some great work. Carolyn Gratterall, who I am unfortunately not familiar with, but I will now look into. Tarek, whom we just hung out with, our own Taylor Hudak, who has been crushing over in the UK. She's been able to get some fantastic interviews, and they're short and concise, and I think effective to the point to where she's being impersonated on Twitter now.
Oh yeah, no, it's that other account is suspended now, but yeah, they've been trolls.
They
fucking with her.
made another one after that. So just to be clear, her real account is @_ Taylor Hudak. There's people.
No,
behind the
I
scenes
checked.
who
I
make
checked
fake
last night.
accounts.
It got suspended.
Okay, the second one did.
Yeah. No, the one that looked
And I
just
just-
like hers.
There'll be more that crop up.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
she's
Yeah.
doing good work. She's made herself a target based on being a competent reporter.
And I just want to say that I'm jealous because no one's made a fake Andrew Smith account yet.
Give
Like,
him
I was
time.
really hoping. No, I know.
I'm
I
gonna
literally
fuck with
messaged
you
her that.
now.
I was like, hey, I'm jealous.
I'm gonna totally screw with you now.
Okay, so Charlie Jones, the court reporter, and I think Kevin mentioned this when, or maybe it was Mo. I'm not sure, man. All of those mornings are starting to blend together. But court reporters do like the basic functions of journalism, and they kind of get shit on for not getting like rock star assignments and whatnot, but they're really doing decent work. Like the majority
I think
of
that was
just
Kevin.
reporters.
I think it was Kevin that mentioned that.
Mary Kostakidis, who we rely on daily for our morning broadcasts, previous vigil guest, frequent flyer on CN, Richard Medhurst, who we need to get a hold of again. Craig
And Richard Medhurst, he does great commentary. He doesn't have access to the cloud video platform,
yeah.
but he piggybacks, and a lot of the times his tweets are as great, if not better, than Juan Passarello's, just in some cases.
Well, he'll like
Like, the
cross-reference
humor is-
documents and shit. Like he's killing it.
Oh, I'm just talking like specifically about the humor too. Is generally on.
Oh, he's a funny ass dude, man.
Yeah. It's great.
Craig Murray, whom we all love, and Action for Assange will probably ramp up our support and defense of Craig Murray definitely during the 4-week lull between the conclusion of this hearing and the beginning of closing arguments. That's something that I want to focus on. The reason that Craig Murray is our man in the public gallery is because the National Union of Journalists refused to reauthorize his credentials.
Following a court case where his reporting on Julian's first round of hearings was specifically cited about why he is such a good journalist. So he's not being allowed access to the cloud video platform or the journalist pool for the court because of a court case about citing his reporting on WikiLeaks as why he should be taken as a credible source for a media outlet that should be censored. So I think that that's fully important to put in context.
Juan, who was just his documentary is something that we played constantly when we were in DC. Just because it's so fucking well put together. And yo, dude, Juan is goddamn hilarious. Like I still just today got a laugh out of a tweet that he put up during the first week because it's a gif of Lionel Richie saying hello.
Hello.
Is it me you're looking for? I don't have Jerry.
I can see it in your heart. I can see it in your eyes. Something like that.
Oh man.
Yeah, we've devolved into singing Lionel Richie.
Assange Defense, DEA campaign, Rebecca Benson. All of them are doing tremendous work, and Rebecca Benson is somebody that we'll also be coordinating with more often. I did get a chance to speak to her briefly this week. So look for some of that, and Kevin was kind enough to mention us here at Action for Assange. Thank you for that very complimentary afterthought, my friend.
And Jordan, just to give a couple shout outs to the independent media too. Convo Couch is doing amazing. MCSC is doing good work. Lee Camp has been relentless covering this. Jimmy Dore has talked about it almost every single day.
Katie Halper's been bringing it up.
Katie Halper, yep. Of course, Max Blumenthal, and I think Glenn Greenwald went on Tucker Carlson to talk about this the first Thursday of the first week, if I remember properly. And many others who I apologize if I'm not grabbing your names and putting them on there.
And thanks to all of you, like especially the Slow News Day Wrench Gang, because you guys have been putting incredible pressure on pundits to discuss this on their shows, and it's working. And most of the time, you don't even have to be mean about it. Like it's awesome. There's carrots and sticks, and I understand that sometimes carrots work. But I also understand that sometimes carrots only work when you're holding the stick.
Word.
So, big shout out to everybody. Do we have... I don't know if I have full question or any more questions in the chat. I believe that Steve will be live tomorrow, but he'll talk about that. We will be back Monday super early in the morning. It'll be like 5:30 for me, 2:30 for Steve to start covering Monday's court cases. I am back in Ohio, so I do have to pretend to have a full-time job again because a lot of times I'm just keeping up on court as it's coming out. But I will be covering the case till probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, and then Steve can generally go until about 10, which is about the time that everyone gets back from lunch.
Yeah, and I should be around the time you're logging off to go to work. Kendra should be popping in at least for a couple of those days.
Cool. And we may try to ask some people if they want to hop in with us early in the morning, but it is super early in the morning.
Fear of being alone on camera. I think
I'll be here with you, Steve.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, so if there's anyone that you would like to see with us here early in the morning and it's responsible for their time zone and their age, please send them a nice reminder and send us a little bit of information to put an ask out to them.
Oh yeah, Gordon Dimmick. Mention Gordon.
Oh yeah, and our friend Gordon. I've been texting with him this last week again.
He definitely brings up Assange.
Oh, always. He's actually, I'm pretty sure he was there on the ground for a couple days for it too, which is a pretty big haul for him.
And thank you, RSFO, for jogging our memory on that because we're all kind of tired.
Yes. But you can find me on closing, if that's cool, Steve. We good?
Me.
Cool. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, ZIGMUND. You can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange, or action4Assange.com. Don't forget to do the calls to action, even if you've done them 2 or 3 times already. Please do them again, and share the links out organically. Say, hey guys, please do this. Hey guys, please do that with people on your Facebooks and Twitters. And
I didn't see no jazz hands.
There was one. I have a little like Browns pencil thing in my other hand.
You're gonna make Misty sad.
Yeah.
I'll make up for it.
My name's Steve Poikin, and you can find me on Twitter at Slow News Day Show because I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find on YouTube, Rockfin, and D Live. I have not been able to confirm a guest for tomorrow, so I may just do a short AMA. I haven't decided yet. If I hear back from the 2 people that I was supposed to hear back from, there will definitely be a full show and an interview. But because everybody I know is fucking sleep deprived and busy as shit right now, it's a little bit harder to get everyone on the same page. Not that I'm regretting a moment of the sleep deprivation. I'm certainly not. But at any rate, I fucking love you guys so much. This is I say it often because it's true. I have the best goddamn chat in the interwebs. And yeah, again, I can't just undying thanks to the people who made the DC trip possible. We're talking about trying to get back to DC for the sentencing. That would be like a 1 or 2 day thing, and I do think we would be able to crowdfund that in a relatively short amount of time. We are also discussing the possibility of doing in-person teach-ins in a handful of cities throughout the US. We would likely be doing 1 or 2 rather on the East Coast, 2 in the Midwest, 2 kind of in the Plains or Colorado area, and then 2 on the West Coast.
So if you guys are interested, shoot us an email if you're interested in having us come out to your city, and it's just info@actionforassange.com.
Yeah, and for the West Coast, I'm thinking currently Seattle and LA. I was also thinking about somewhere in Florida, and then probably New York.
Well, we'll talk off camera, but we have a good chance of getting one in coordination with other groups in DC too, to make it a bigger event out there. So that's probably something we can look at too.
Yeah. And then just so it doesn't kill everyone financially and we don't have to crowdfund a significant amount, we'll probably like divide up areas based on current location. At any rate, fuck, man, thanks to Andrew for co-hosting and for just fucking working his ass off every waking second of every fucking day. Sleepy Josh on the 1s and 2s, Mean Panda for our graphics, and we will see you again very soon. Good luck to us all.